Okay, so here we go. We're gonna do a Bannock tutorial. So I've got all my ingredients pre-measured out. That's 1 cup of flour. I use unbleached. You can use all-purpose or basically any other kind. I find that gluten-free flour, I tried to use the Robin Hood kind and it did not work at all. For some reason the flour wasn't forming up. You couldn't get it to make a dough. So I I don't know if you can figure out a different gluten-free option, but yeah. And then what I've got over here is 1 teaspoon of baking powder, a 1/4 teaspoon of salt, and then a tablespoon of sugar. The other ingredient you're going to want to have is a 1/2 cup of cold water or milk. And then you're gonna need some oil for deep frying. So let's get this mixed up. So what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna put in my flour and my other dry ingredients all at once. Grab a fork. And I'm just gonna mix those together really well. This is going to be a pretty small batch. If you want to make a bigger one, you're just going to double all of those amounts. All right, that's all mixed up. Now, the other thing I like to do is cut in some butter. And I don't really usually measure this out. I just kind of throw a couple chunks of cold butter in there, and doesn't really matter salt or without. I use with salt because it gives it a bit more flavor. Sorry. Just getting it down into some littler chunks. So there's my butter. And then same as a pie crust, you just kind of want to mix it in until you get like the pea-sized shapes. So that's what's going to happen here. This butter's really cold. I'm just going to set this down while I do this. Let's see, how do we make this work? Okay. Yeah. Yeah, so I'm just mashing the butter in, mixing it in until I get those like pea-sized shapes and it kind of is crumbly. I'll show you what it looks like after that's done. I'm just gonna add a bit more butter because as you can see it's kind of starting to get those like pea-shaped crumbs, but not really as many of them as I want. And so like adding butter is just gonna give you like kind of a lighter, flakier bannock. So hold on. A little bit more. All right, now I'm happy. All right, so you can see these little chunks are forming up in there. as you're mixing it around. And that's the butter and everything. Get that off my fork. Okay, so now I'm just gonna go ahead and dump my milk in. And again, same thing. Milk just gives you a bit of a, I find it makes it a little bit lighter, but if you didn't have milk on hand or you don't use milk, water works just fine. I'm just going to start mixing that together till it starts binding together. Now, you're going to want to keep your flour on hand because when you start getting that ball of dough forming up, hold on. It's probably going to be pretty sticky. So let me just get this all mixed together and I'll show you what that looks like. Okay, so it's all formed up, and then this is still really, really sticky. So if you were to try and roll that out now, it would just stick to you basically. So what you just do is grab like a small handful of flour, and you're gonna just kind of sprinkle that over top, and then start working that flour in. I just do it by hand, and if it's still sticking, you just kind of want to sprinkle a little bit more flour, and see it's very sticky still. A little bit more flour on there. And then if you find that your bannock is too dry, you just sprinkle like a tablespoon of water on at a time, and then you just keep doing that until you get the right consistency. And so basically what you want is something that you can knead that's not sticking to you when you try and knead it. So again, that's still pretty sticky, so I'm just adding a little tiny bit of flour at a time until I get it to the point that it's not sticking to me anymore. It's not sticking to the bowl, and then what you're going to do is come in and get all the stuff that's stuck to the sides and work that back in, and just keep doing that for a bit. Okay. Still just a tiny bit sticky. Okay, so that's good. That's not sticking to me, and it's not sticking to the bowl anymore. Now what we're gonna do is we're gonna need this. Just a little bit more. So I just keep folding it, and then again, if you start finding spots are sticking to you, just a little bit more flour. Just a sprinkle at a time there. Should be good, so give me a second while I get rid of this. things rinse real quick. Okay. All right. Okay, now I'm gonna get out my cutting board. Okay, so I'm just gonna go ahead and sprinkle a bit of flour on that. Get the surface nice and covered, and then I'm gonna grab my Bannock dough. Just gonna stretch it out a little bit. And then, let's see if I can set this up. Oops. There we go. Hold up, sorry. That's not working. Okay. Oh, zoom out. Ah. Alright. Let's go with that. I'm just going to grab a rolling pin. And I'm going to flour that. I'm just going to roll it out a little bit. Not too much. So I find the difference between if I'm doing baked and if I'm doing fried. If I'm doing baked, I want to spend a good long time kneading it. Like about 10 minutes just kneading this, and then you get it back into a loaf basically, and you put that in the oven until it's like golden brown. But for fried, I find if you overwork it too much, you get a really chewy consistency. So now I'm gonna grab a knife, and I'm just gonna cut down pieces. And what I do, ones that are about yay big, not super big, like little triangles, and then you're gonna cut slits, 2 slits in the piece, and then just stretch it out a little bit so you got like 2 eyes going on, and then set that aside. Just keep going here. The other thing you can do is set this aside to rise for about half an hour to an hour. And you get makes it a little bit fluffier, but if you're in a hurry, it doesn't really matter. If I have more time, I usually do set it aside to rise for a while. Okay, so that little batch that we made just made 6 fairly decent sized pieces. A couple of them are a little bit smaller. I'm just gonna hands again. Okay, so we got those pieces set aside. We're gonna come over to the stove. Like to use a big old cast iron pan. And then for temperature, I don't actually use a thermometer. What I do is I start it off at around a 5 or a 6 depending on the oven. This one I usually keep it around 5. And then I'm gonna give some time for the oil to heat up. You can use lard, margarine if you have it, but I'm just gonna use some oil. All I have on hand right now is olive oil, so I'm just gonna use a little bit of that. You don't need a heck of a lot of oil, really. I say if you keep the temperature low and slow, but just high enough that it's actually gonna fry, you don't need a whole hell of a lot. As long as your oil is not burning. I think I'm actually gonna do just a bit more there. This is a pretty big pan. Okay, so while that's heating up, what I like to do is I'll take like a little leftover crumb of the dough out of the bowl, the mixing bowl, and I'm just gonna plop it in there. And when you see that thing start popping and stuff, that's when you know your oil's hot enough. Now, if you're dropping your bannock in and it's just cooking right away, your oil's too hot, obviously, so just turn it down. So that's just gonna take a minute. Grab a drink here. I actually think I might switch over to a smaller pan. This one's pretty big. No, let's go with the little guy. Just hold on a second.